So, welcome, one and all. I am Professor Albus Percival Wilfred Brian Dumbledore. Very nice to meet all of you. And since there have recently been books published all about me, I thought I'd come in here and, talk about some of what they're saying out there. We tried. So, are we all familiar with the tale of the three brothers?
Yes.
One of the tales of Beetle the Bard. If you're not familiar, there are books, there are Wizard Rock songs. Someone even did a fabulous lip sync battle performance of this that may be on YouTube. Anyway, so the tale of the three brothers. Frankly, this was my favorite fairy tale growing up. I believe I mentioned in my notes for this book that it soon became the tale I requested more than any other at bedtime, which frequently led to arguments with my younger brother Aberforth, whose favorite story was Grumble the Grubby Goat. And well, you have the tale of two brothers, and you have Grumble the Grubby Goat. Is it any wonder we didn't get along? But as much as I liked the tale of the three brothers, I never really expected to find myself living it. And yet, life turns out in unexpected ways. So, as I realized, many years after the fact, the events of the tale of the three brothers did sort of parallel the events towards the end of my life. The last few years, once Harry Potter came to Hogwarts, and we got all wrapped up in that. The trio that Harry once termed the abandoned boys of Hogwarts, which would be Tom Riddle, Severus Snape, and Harry Potter, are direct parallels to the three brothers in the tale. And so I figure I'll just go into them one by one and sort of show these surprising parallels. So, perhaps the most obvious one is how Lord Voldemort represents the oldest brother, Antioch Pepperell, who receives the Elder Wand from death. To boot. So the oldest brother, who was a combative man, asked for a wand more powerful than any in existence. A wand that must always win duels for its owner. A wand worthy of the wizard who had conquered death. Sound familiar? Voldemort was also a combative man who was seeking the most powerful wand in existence. In fact, he used that exact turn of phrase when he was resurrected in 1995. He said to his Death Eaters, "You know my goal, to conquer death." And rather like Antioch Pepperell, Lord Voldemort believes that he has conquered death thanks to his Horcruxes, which just disappointing. So, to quote from the tale again, the first brother sought out a fellow wizard with whom he had a quarrel. Naturally, with the Elder Wand as his weapon, he could not fail to win the duel that followed. Leaving his enemy dead upon the floor, the oldest brother proceeded to an inn where he boasted loudly of the powerful wand he had snatched from death himself and of how it made him invincible. Sound familiar? Lord Voldemort, too, sought out a wizard with whom he had a quarrel. One, Harry Potter, which, dude was obsessed with a teenager. And yes, after the events of the Battle of Hogwarts, he leaves Harry dead upon the floor at first. And then he returns to Hogwarts, boasting loudly of how he had triumphed over Harry Potter. And sure enough, just like the eldest brother in the tale, Voldemort's arrogance proves his undoing, and he was killed that very night. So, really the parallels do just sort of write themselves. Moving on to the middle brother of the tale, Cadmus Pepperell. The parallel here is Severus Snape. If you recall, Cadmus Pepperell receives the Resurrection Stone from death because of a longing for a long-lost love of his. Now, when Cadmus uses the stone, The figure of the girl he had once hoped to marry, before her untimely death, appeared at once before him. And now Severus Snape is also consumed with longing for a girl whom he loved before her untimely death, Lily Potter. Now, this doesn't seem entirely healthy. Like 17 years onwards. Now look, Snape's whole thing for Lily proved very, very useful to me. So I really can't complain. But dude really should have gotten over it. And then we come to the youngest brother, Ignatus Pepperell, who received the invisibility cloak from Voldemort. The parallel here is obviously Harry Potter. Now, you know I don't pick favorites, but Harry, he's my favorite. The youngest brother was the humblest and also the wisest of the three brothers. And let me tell you, Harry is certainly the humblest and the wisest of that trio. And rather like Ignatus Pepperell, Harry is the only one to evade death at the end of the day. He lived a long, full life with terribly named sons that he doubtless bequeaths the cloak to. Look, Albus, flattering, but... So, all well and good. Voldemort, Snape, Harry are the three brothers of the tale. But where do I come in? Well, I'm so glad you asked. Now, it's not in my habit to make outlandish claims or any such. So, I believe here we can turn to the words of one Joe Rowling, who wrote some biographical tomes you may be familiar with. When a fan named Abby Owen-Jones asked Joe Rowling in 2015 what her favorite theory was, she replied, "Dumbledore as death. It's a beautiful theory and it fits." And so if you think about it, I was like, yeah, that checks out. So, blow by blow. Rather like death in the tale of the three brothers, I was instrumental in distributing the Hallows to the three of them at the beginning. So, Voldemort literally took the Elder Wand out of my dead hands. Harry, obviously, I gave the invisibility cloak to in his first year. Now, with Snape, it's not as clear-cut as that, because I certainly never gave Severus Snape the Resurrection Stone. However, I did replicate its effects for him in a way. When I charged Snape with protecting Harry, wasn't I, in a way, providing him with a poor imitation of the woman he loved? In her son, who may have her eyes and her deepest nature, but who looks mostly like Snape's worst enemy. And you ever wonder if maybe Harry was a ginger like Lily, if maybe Snape wouldn't have been such a... Anyway, makes you think. And so, just as Cadmus Pepperell willingly gave his life to death due to his love for a dead woman, you can argue that Severus Snape really did the same thing. He put his life in my hands, agreeing to do whatever I asked due to his love for Lily. It weirdly fits. But back to Voldemort. So, Voldemort says that he fears death above all else. And in those biographical tomes, as you may have read, everyone keeps saying that Dumbledore is the only wizard Voldemort had ever feared. Toss, toss. I believe it's said by our friend Ruby's Hagrid, by Hermione Granger, by Bill Weasley, by Harry Potter. I believe it even lends itself to one of the titles of the chapters in those tomes. So the conflation of myself with death renders these statements doubly true. I'm the only one Voldemort ever feared because his worst fear is death. Bang!
Nice.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. On a grimmer note, slightly less flattering, less nice, I was kind of the key orchestrator in the deaths of all three of the abandoned boys.
Yeah.
I devoted the last years of my life to destroying Voldemort and seeing his downfall, and For further details of that, this lovely new biography will tell you all about it. And also in the biography, as it says, I painted a target on Severus Snape's back when I asked him to kill me in 1997. Because, as I say, I knew eventually Voldemort would come after him to get the Elder Wand. So, in a roundabout way, and I think it's not really fair, but you could say that Severus Snape's death at Voldemort's hand is only a little bit tiny way my fault. And obviously, my final grand master plan in this whole war revolved around Harry laying down his life, which he did because of my words in The Prince's Tale. But note the difference among the three. Where Snape and especially Voldemort greeted death unwillingly, Harry made the choice to sacrifice his life. As the tale says, the youngest brother finally took off the cloak. Sorry, I lost my place. The youngest brother finally took off the cloak of invisibility and gave it to his son, and then he greeted death as an old friend. Right before Harry is hit by the killing curse in the Battle of Hogwarts, he pulls off his invisibility cloak. And then, sure enough, I'm there at King's Cross, where he greets me as an old friend. But back to Voldemort. This part is really satisfying, because I did it. In I'm Dead, Voldemort's final moments exactly mirror Antioch Pepperell's. Recall that Antioch bragged how he was a wizard who had conquered death. Now, Voldemort also believes that he has conquered. He makes that specific boast in the Battle of Hogwarts. Because he's talking that he brought about the death of Albus Dumbledore. But, naturally, I was wilier than him, because I was already dying at the time, so... And just before he died, the first brother boasted loudly of the powerful wand he had snatched from death himself, and of how it made him invincible. During Harry and Voldemort's final détente, in the Battle of Hogwarts, where, circling dramatically and, having great conversation about ways and means, Voldemort boasts, Dumbledore was trying to keep the Elder Wand from me. I reached the wand before you could get your hands on it. The Elder Wand, the Death Stick, the Wand of Destiny is truly mine. Dumbledore's last plan went wrong, Harry Potter. I stole the wand from its last master's tomb. I removed it against its last master's wishes. Its power is mine. And just like death in the Tale of the Three Brothers, I got the last laugh at the end. So, I believe I'm going to pause here for any questions, comments, concerns we may have before we go on to the second part of the presentation. Yes?
I've always loved this parallel. I've always found it really interesting because I feel like when I first read the books and I read the story of the Three Brothers, I was like, this feels familiar. But it's specifically this idea of Dumbledore as death, which I think she did intentionally, which I think is so interesting because he never actually gets all three.
Right. He
could, because he had the wand and the stone at the same time. He totally could have taken the cloak from Harry and been the master of death, and he still wasn't. Which I think is interesting because I think he feels like he knows the parallel is there because he gives Hermione the book, and he's like, no, I won't be that.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's because I felt unworthy of the Hallows. Sort of after a long life, well lived, I knew that, a man in a million could unite the Hallows, and that wasn't me. I was permitted to have the Elder Wand, permitted to tame it, and to keep it from doing more harm. But I was unworthy of the cloak. And I was very obviously unworthy of the stone, as we found it. Which is actually a very good transition. So talk of the Resurrection Stone. I thought that this would have been the end of the story, Salisbury Brothers, the abandoned boys, Mia's death, and we call it a day. However, recently, I have been subjected to a slanderous accusation, worse than anything Rita Skeeter could have come up with. And I just need to set the record straight. So this accusation came in a community called Alohomora, a Harry Potter podcast where I believe they discuss Harry's life, chapter by chapter and all of that, which comes very highly recommended. And in the comments on one of the episodes, someone called the Silver Quill pointed out something curious about the part of the Battle of Hogwarts where Harry uses the Resurrection Stone. So, I'll read the full comment. Something about it always seemed off to me. The characters who literally laid down their lives for Harry are encouraging him in that scene to die. It contrasts even more with Goblet of Fire, chapter 34, where they are there to encourage and support him. Had James, Lily, Remus, and Sirius been alive, I refuse to believe that they would have encouraged Harry to walk to his death. Now, this could be because of wisdom they have gained in death, but I wonder if it's something else. Think about it. This stone was created by death. His purpose in creating the Hallows was to draw their users to him. Wouldn't it make sense, then, that the stone would just show its user whatever would convince them to die? No, the author of this biography had a complete crisis of conscience and a meltdown upon reading this comment. Were all the theories wrong? So this presents a rather different reading of Harry's experience with the Resurrection Stone. Now, the exact lines from that moment in time were, "You are nearly there," said James. "Very close. We're so proud of you." And Harry asks, "Does it hurt?" "Dying? Not at all," says Sirius. "Quicker and easier than falling asleep." Now, the obvious answer here is that the shades are there to comfort Harry. However, if you had a suspicious mind, you could read them as beckoning Harry towards death. So, essentially, what it all comes down to is, how does the Resurrection Stone work? Does it bring back a genuine echo of those who are at peace? Or does it call forth a skewed version of the dead, so death can claim the user? Now,
what does it say about, I'm sorry, I'm very curious about this because you just blown my mind. The second brother,
yes.
Is it a similar thing where she beckons him to death in the story?
He was
Yes.
consumed with grief.
Yeah,
and
because
ended up killing
she's
himself.
upset. She's like
Yeah.
really upset.
Yeah.
And
kind of same thing happened with Albus when he put the ring on.
Yeah.
That started his death as well.
to his amazement and his delight, the figure of the girl he had once hoped to marry before her untimely death appeared at once before him. Yes, she was sad and cold, separated from him as by a veil. Though she had returned to the mortal world, she did not truly belong there and suffered. Finally, the second brother, driven mad with hopeless longing, killed himself so as to truly join her, and so death took the second brother for his own.
So interesting. Because if someone you love dies and you see them again, you're going to miss them so much that you're going to want to die.
Yeah. I mean, that's what the stone of the story is.
Oh, I totally get that. I mean, I'm sorry, even if my loved ones came back, I wouldn't be like, oh, yeah, I want to join them to death.
Yeah.
But there are certainly people that, if you're Snape and you've been obsessed with somebody for however many years.
Or if the person you love is like, join me, I'm sad. Join me, I'm sad, it makes me happy. I would be tempted to want that.
Yeah.
What if the stone's specific to the owner or the person that's holding it?
Yeah.
It works differently with all of them, but
Yeah,
it
it does
still
work
heals them all to
differently.
death.
Yeah, and while we can't know about Khaytman's power, Severus Snape had no one else in his life, which is why the specter of Lily was so tempting.
When he decided to kill himself, I thought he was doing it as a way to protect his friends who were all sacrificing themselves. I didn't really feel like it was a manipulation. It was more like he had decided he had to keep his friends from all being killed. in the battle.
Yes.
And I don't think it really had anything to do with, but it's an interesting idea. I haven't to think about it.
I agree.
You see what I'm
And
saying now? Does that
I do,
make sense?
because I very much agree. So, now that this case has been brought before us, I think it's only fitting that I can defend myself from this. As we just read in the Tale of the Three Brothers, it's just the latter interpretation, that the Elder Wand and the Resurrection Stone are very clearly designed by death to claim the lives of their users. But I say, this is a fairy tale.
It is?
It is. There's plenty of other things in these tales that clearly cannot exist. For example, Babbity Rabbity. She could not talk if she were a rabbit animagus. That's not how animagi work. There's some creative license here. So, what it's going to come down to is whether you believe that the fairy tale is literally what's true in the real wizarding world, or not. Now, I addressed this with Harry in King's Cross when he asked me. I believe the exact words I used were, the Peveril brothers were the three brothers of the tale. Oh yes, I think so. Whether they met death on a lonely road, I think it more likely the Peveril brothers were simply gifted, dangerous wizards who succeeded in creating those powerful objects. The story of them being death's own hallows seems to be the sort of legend that might have sprung up around such creations. So, essentially this comes down to whether or not you believe me. If the hallows were crafted by the Peverils, then there's nothing more to see here. Then works as it's supposed to work, and so forth. If they are death's own hallows, then they are probably indeed designed to lure the users into death's hands, which would not be a good look for me. Now, I understand the case against me. If the Resurrection Stone is meant to lure Harry to his death, then I would obviously have known about it, and I would obviously have factored that into my plans. Now, the thing about Harry sacrificing himself, I know he has a saving people thing, or, as we called it in the Triwizard Tournament, moral fiber, or as Grace Candido Beecher calls out on the Aloha Mora podcast, oh look, it's sacrifice o'clock.
Yeah, he's a martyr.
Yes.
I'm thinking about I open and close.
Yes. Hold it.
Cool. I'll shut up. Cool, got it.
Now, I told Severus Snape when we were planning all this out, Harry must not know, not until the last moment, not until it is necessary. Otherwise, how could he have the strength to do what must be done? Now, that wasn't strictly honest. Look, I know Harry. I know that he would sacrifice himself at the drop of a hat. The real reason I didn't want Harry told about the whole, sacrifice yourself to Voldemort whole spiel, is I didn't want to put him through that. I was procrastinating the moment he would find out he would have to die. It was an act of generosity, I thought. And this is, again, detailed very clearly in this new biography. Now, if the Resurrection Stone is meant to lure people to their death, then it would have been my failsafe. Harry's sacrifice was the centerpiece of all my plans against Voldemort. It really all came down to that in the end. And yes, if the Resurrection Stone is as sinister as people believe, it would be a redundancy in the plan. It would be there to give Harry the final push towards sacrificing himself, towards laying down his life, if he faltered. And this may seem like a small change in the grand scheme of things, but I don't think so. I think it would fundamentally change the character of all my schemes and machinations. I left Harry the Resurrection Stone to comfort him in his final moments. That is why the open and the close thing was there. I was worried that Harry would succumb to the temptation of the Resurrection Stone. But I did want him to have the comfort of his loved ones on that final march in the forest again. And that is why I left him the stone, but only under the condition that he was about to die or he could access it. And, okay, there was also some, like, Master of Death plans going on. It was kind of a separate thing, but anyway.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do you think that, I've always wondered this, if Dumbledore thought that Harry was actually going to die, or if he knew that he was going to come back? Because if we're comforting him, then it's curious, and just going to hand you the book.
Chapter 6. Chapter 6 is pretty much that question. Did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I've been theorizing for a long time, maybe 3 or 4 years, that Dumbledore didn't die and it was predestination because he went back in time. For one thing, there's a wonderful scene in the movie, I don't remember the books as well, and I read all of them, but Harry's up there really, really high, and he falls off the room, and somebody goes blah, 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 and he stops before he hits the ground and goes splat. Well, why couldn't Dumbledore have done that? Why couldn't he have faked his own death, fallen off the tower and gone blah, 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 and stopped before he went splat? And then use the time turner to go back or forward and find out what the heck is going to happen and then manipulate the whole dang thing.
Well, he was dead before
Well,
he fell. Because
yes, so that
Was he?
he was. So there's a lot going on there.
I have some doubts. I'm in denial.
To answer your theory, Dumbledore was A, weakened from the potion in the cave and about to die. B,
he was weakened before that.
yes. B, my ticking clock from the Resurrection Stone, the curse, all that. I had a year as of July the previous year, and this was June, so like clock was ticking. So yes, regrettably, I very much did die that night, and there was no time travel, none of that.
I'm sorry,
To go back to your question, I hoped Harry wouldn't die. I believe I told Harry that he and Lord Voldemort have ventured into realms of magic unknown and untested, because they've been connected 7 different ways to Sunday through souls and curses and wands and blood. So I hoped that that Lily's blood in Voldemort's body through his sacrifice would be enough to keep Harry alive. That's why I had a gleam of triumph in my eyes when Harry told me that happened. But I didn't know for sure. The other thing, and this is getting a little off topic, but why not? Master of Death. I told Harry that to be Master of Death means you have made your peace with death, that you greet death willingly, which is true. But what if to be Master of Death, the way Xenophilius Lovegood meant it, was true? What if to be Master of Death, to own the 3 Hallows, made you a conqueror, a vanquisher of death? Bit of a stretch, but that is why I made sure Harry would get the 3 Hallows. That was part of my final plan. The reason I brought in the Hallows at the 11th hour was to make Harry Master of Death and just help give him more of a fighting chance to survive that sacrifice. So yes, I hoped he would, and Lord knows I moved heaven and earth to try to make sure he would, but I didn't know for sure.
And what you didn't orchestrate Harry having a wand.
But did I though? So
Getting into Brick was a good bet, but there's no guarantee that's supposed to happen.
Exactly.
It's supposed to be.
So there was a plan to get the wand to Harry. And rather like many of my plans, it went horribly, miserably.
Right.
Yeah. The plan was for Snape to get the wand, and then get it to Harry, and eventually that would be how Harry would end up with the wand. Problem was, little Slytherin Draco Malfoy disarmed me, won the wand's allegiance, and so literally in the last moment of my life, I realized that one of my grand plans had just gone to hell, and there was nothing I could do. So, yes, the fact that Harry did end up Master of Death in a very roundabout, coincidental, lucky way really was just an incredible stroke of luck. But there was a plan to make Harry Master of Death. Alright, but we have gone off track. And I want to defend myself from this horrible accusation.
Is it so horrible?
I think so. I would be offended to think that people consider me to have tried to lure Harry towards death in his final moments with the stone instead of trying to give him comfort.
But Dumbledore knows that the purpose must be destroyed within Harry. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
Lord
Yeah.
Voldemort makes sense that guarantees Voldemort will be defeated.
It makes sense. However, a lot of the magic, and a lot of the magic at play here, is about choices, about willing self-sacrifice. The only way that this type of high magic works, the only way Harry's sacrifice would imbue other people with protection, the way Lily's did for him, is if Harry had the choice and willingly sacrificed himself. That is integral to all of this. And now, because of this, I spent years and years harping on about choices. Choices are important. Choose what's right, not what's easy. And yeah. In the end, it worked. And look, I'm not above a little leading the witness here. I believe when I'm with Harry at King's Cross and he's deciding whether to go on or to go back to the Battle of Hogwarts, I gently pointed out to him that it's up to you, but by returning, you made sure that fewer souls are maimed, fewer families are torn apart. If that seems to you a worthy goal, totally your choice. Just, putting that out there, but totally his choice. But I don't think that type of self-sacrifice and magic would work with essentially a magical hoodwink, which is what the Resurrection Stone would have been. So even apart from the ethical aspect of it, I don't think magically it would have checked out for me to use the Resurrection Stone that way. A little corollary to this whole theory about the Resurrection Stone is that I myself used it in the last year of my life. Met the shades of my family, they attempted to drive me towards death, and that's how I found out how the stone works, and yada, yada, yada. Which, seems like fertile ground for some heartbreaking fan fiction, but was not the case. I told Harry that when I first found the ring Horcrux, I picked it up and I put it on, and for a second I imagined that I was about to see Ariana and my mother and my father, and to tell them how very, very sorry I was. I was such a fool, Harry. That means that I did not, in fact, see Ariana and my mother and my father, and did not get to do that. Only imagined it. I pick my words carefully. And I also told him in King's Cross, the stone I would have used in an attempt to drag back those who are at peace. Again, would have, did not. Honestly, by that point, I knew enough to not try to lure people back from death. I did not want to drag my family back if they were at peace, particularly because I was going to join them in less than a year.
Well, I don't think that it's clear that that's why he didn't use the stone. I interpreted that he tried to, but he put the ring on, and then Voldemort's spells took effect, and he didn't get a chance to use the stone.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when I saw the ring, I admit that sort of impulse control, just forgot everything and I just sort of grabbed for it, but did not actually get to see Ariana and my family because of the curse and the Snape and dying and all that. I'm saying that after the fact. Once the curse was under control, once I knew I had a year left to live, then, I could have tried using the stone again, but I didn't.
Well, there was no reason to. You're going to join them in a year.
That's what I'm saying.
The stone did its work then, even without using it.
I mean, was it the stone or was it Voldemort's curse?
You're fine with the Voldemort magic.
All right. But that is my case before you. I maintain that I did not use the stone to try to lure Harry to his death. I maintain that is not how the stone works. Frankly, I've always been trusted upon my impressions of how really weird, complex magic works. Everyone goes like, Dumbledore, why did Harry's wand shoot golden flames or make a cage of light? And I'm like, well, I have theories, and those theories are usually correct. So, yes, at the end it does come down to whether you believe that these are Death's own hallows or whether you believe that my impression of them is accurate and they are just extremely dangerous objects that should not be used except by my favorite Harry Potter. And with that, I thank you for coming to a panel all about death. Any more comments or questions? Yes?
Do you think that Harry was actually the third brother's son?
Yes.
Yeah.
I believe that is pretty explicitly stated.
Yeah.
The cloak was passed down through the family from Ignatus to his daughter to so on and so forth. Yes. Anyone else? Or just, how are we going to time? Okay, we're not on time, so we're done. Thank you so much. If you want to pick up a copy of the Dumbledore biography and find out all about all these theories, there are lots of quotes, lots of research. These will be selling in the vendor room, and the author will be signing them. That will be happening right now at 1 o'clock. That will also be happening at 3 o'clock, and maybe sort of sporadically through the day. I have 8 more panels I'm doing. Come to Cosplay on a Dime at 2 p.m., Majority Rules at 4 p.m., and my dance class at 6 p.m. And with that, thank you so much for coming.